Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast number 343. The Eyes Have It. How are you folks doing? Trust you're doing well. Spring's going just full bore. It's great to see. I've been from Texas all the way back up the eastern starboard or across in Montana, California, and spring has sprung. It's great. I love all the photo ops. I'm not a huge posy pictures, but even I thought they were just gorgeous. So thanks for taking a little bit of your shooting time from this spring to spend with me here on the podcast. Had a couple really great emails this week. I continue to be amazed at your kind words. I'm really quite appreciative of all that you have to say, be it email and in person. So thank you so much. It really means quite a bit. And if I can be so bold as to ask you to spread the word a little bit more, I'd be grateful. I appreciate being one of the top podcasts in Norway, but I would love to have it in some other countries as well. So spread the word, Moose Podcast. Thanks, guys. Also, I need to thank my sponsors, my dear friends, cohorts in crime, Bedford's Camera, bedfords.com. Um, Still cranking out product, and this past week did a huge favor for another podcast listener. Killer deal on trade-in gear and putting new stuff in his hand and getting him all from F mount all to Z mount, and he's happy. It's amazing what Bedfords can do. Now they have an event coming up next week. I guess it's this weekend. Yeah, this weekend. That's right. Today is May Day. This weekend, 5th through the 7th at Eureka Springs, my dear friend Dixie Dixon will be there, as well as other great shooters. There's going to be seminars. There'll be some great gear. There'll be factory representatives. It's going to be just another example how Bedford's goes really above and beyond to help us photographers, you know, do it is what we do with the passion we have. So, Bedford, thank you so much. Home of the Moose 5% discount. Great gear, great serve at bedfords.com. Getting right into this week's episode, The Eyes Have It. Now, AI has been on the forefront of a lot of people, which, as I've said many times, yeah, it's not getting me excited. Other than the amazing things Adobe has done to make my life simpler, i.e., the masking in Adobe Camera Raw, or the whatever I just recently learned about, the denoise AI, which is just phenomenal. But more people are talking about how AI, quote unquote, fakes an image. And that kind of brings me to this topic I have. The eyes have it. Now, in a recently published piece by National Geographic, uh, put out on April 20th of this year, they have an very interesting article. The first takeaway is kind of like the subtitle for the article. And it says, to quote, it takes 13 milliseconds to process a picture. When you take more time to look, what you find may surprise you. I'm going to repeat that. It takes 13 milliseconds to process a picture. When you take more time to look, what you find may surprise you. Wow. 13 milliseconds to process. Now, I haven't timed it. I don't know how they time that kind of stuff. But when you blink your eyes, is that like 13 milliseconds? I mean, 13 milliseconds, that's like nothing. And they're putting it out there in print. And Geographic is pretty smart people. Gotta figure they know what they're talking about. Now, what they're talking about when it comes to processing a picture in that time is that AI is nowhere near perfect. And they go on to talk about how AI has, like, will put six fingers on people's hands and doesn't know how to do eyes yet. And I mean, and AI is of course learning, but at this point in time, they put forth that in those 13 milliseconds, you can catch a fake, as in a photograph that was created through AI. And their first step, they say, to catching a fake is to slow down. Now, yes, as you might guess it, I've got a different twist on this whole thing. And that is, if our eyes are so good that in 13 milliseconds we can take a picture and determine if it's fake, think of the power your eyes have to making that photograph happen. But as they say, the first step is to slow down. Now, they go on to talk about how we are inundated by images all day long, and that we process these images all day long. And for everything you can imagine, for information, for religion, for emotion, for communication, for sales, for knowledge. I mean, it's the whole gamut. We take that information in and we are just inundated by it. But the brain, which I know for myself, totally speaking for myself, my brain's not always connected. The information my eyes are taking in don't necessarily exactly push the right button in the brain for me to go, oh, aha. But maybe I'm not following the very first step to slow down. Let's take that basic premise and what happens if we were actually to apply it to our photography. So you go into this article, and one thing they talk about that we humans are really sensitive to minute characteristics of the face, especially the eyes. Okay, especially the eyes. We pick up so much so quickly. Um, they quote the professor of psychology at University of San Francisco, who's an expert in micro expressions. And it says that we can determine friend from foe, emotional status um, in this brief milliseconds just through the eyes. Now, that information, if we put it to our photography, think of what we can do. Okay. Now, I've mentioned a whole lot of times that simple thing for my dear friend Jay Mazel, light, gesture, and color. And that gesture, right? The eyes, right off the bat. We have to plug into it though. That is, we've got to slow down. We have to plug into it. So to put it into practical terms, I was walking and haunting the boardwalks at Maggie or Magee, however you want to say it, Marsh in Ohio this last week. And while it's not the same experience as it was when I first went there, it's still a great experience. It's still, there is magic in that place. Some of it was down low. There was a pair of nesting Virginia rails. Some of it was up high, and not just the wobblers, but we had an eastern screech owl. Now, in both of those cases, how do you know when to take the photograph? Well, one of the things that we have to have in our critter photographies is sharp eyes, which means we have to see the eyes. And what we are learning in this piece from Geographic from this professor of psychology at University of San Francisco is that we can see micro expressions in a few milliseconds to talk about the different state in which something's at. And critters are just as, not that far off from humans when it comes to expressing their emotions through their eyes, their gesture. If we slow down and we take that into account before we fire that button, or as we go through our images and before we decide we're going to put them out to the world, might we not start to improve our photography by we start seeing, as he wants to call, micro expressions? I think so. Now, in that same approach, if we can't see into the eye, and of course, why couldn't we see in the eye? Not because it's blocked physically, but because of light. Our eyes are really good for that too. And the article goes on to talk about that. It says, for AI, which I think this is kind of fascinating. AI has a hell of a time with light and shadows. It's really tricky for AI to reproduce. And that's especially true, it says, if it's like a window or a reflective surface. It don't do so good there. Okay. In part because AI has a problem with the laws of physics. Now, that's really interesting. Our eyes, in 13 milliseconds, can look at an AI generated image and we can tell the unnatural smoothness between highlight and shadows to detect that's an AI generated image. Of course, with that number one caveat, slowing down. Now, if that's the case, that's right. You see where I'm going, right? If that's the case, if we can see it in a fake, we can see it in our viewfinder, our EVF. We can see that difference between light and shadow. And if we can see that difference, we can make a better photograph. And oh, I'm going to be the first one to admit that when I was photographing, or I should say, starting off looking at those Virginia rails, and I hadn't photographed one with a digital. I had photographed them back in the days of film. So it means I haven't photographed one since at least 1998. So that's a long drought, right? 25 years. That there's that when that little bird hit that viewfinder, clickety clickety click. Well, with a mirrorless, there's no clickety clickety click, but you know what I mean, right? Mirrorless, no noise. But anyway, and of course, I took my few pictures, and in my brain, I said, okay, I broke the jinx. But I looked at the photograph and ooh, the light was nasty, man, nasty. And I knew the photographs would not see, sorry for the bad pun, the light of day. I have them so I could, break that jinx to get the shot. But then I slowed down and I looked at the opportunities before me. And if it wasn't like, even though I had that pro photo and I was putting some light in there, they live in a real kind of busy world with all these tangles and stuff. And anything between the flash and that bird was what? Closer to me than that rail. And we know from the inverse square law that those branches are going to be brighter because they're physically closer to that flash. So, yeah, again, looking at those subtle details between highlight and shadow, something that our eyes can perceive in a quote unquote faked AI picture, we got to start taking that and putting it into our photographs. Now, here's the thing. You got to understand that this AI, which has got some people really just wigged out, we can learn, and we are learning a lot of stuff about ourselves in this process. So, I mean, things like, well, this article goes on, and AI is actually changing the way some are doing wildlife research. So there's a positive. The thing is, okay, is that the biologists are looking at not much differently what I'm trying to explain to you, that the eye and what it can see and can't see and what AI can and cannot reproduce, there is in that fingerprint of information that we can latch onto to tell our story. And well, How does this really help you? Well, the first and most important thing, really, as far as I'm concerned, is that we have to understand that we have this incredibly powerful tool, our eyes, connected to a vision center in our brains, for simple terms, that translate all the information we have out there in the world so we now see what we see. And our cameras, bless their hearts, are still a cold hearted bastard. They don't have a pulse, they don't have that reasoning. They look at things at ones and zeros. So we have to guide it through this world to bring those photographs to life. If our eyes, okay, to bring this back, are powerful enough connected with our brains to see when that cold hearted bastard tries to fake us with an AI generated photograph and we can perceive and see the difference, then it stands to reason that when we have the real McCoy in our viewfinder, we can see what it takes to make that photograph come to life. Now, here's the big void. Seeing it and knowing how to capture it, that will always remain our challenge. There is no photographer I have ever met, read about, idolized, mentored, who every single click nailed it. It is part of the challenge, part of the romance, part of the passion of photography to see it and then be challenged to bring it to life in our EVF. And the more you challenge yourself at the point of capture, the better your point of capture will be. If you rely on post to finish a photograph, we already know from this one very simple piece from Geographic that in 13 milliseconds, we can tell that photograph's been screwed with. That shoots your credibility down the tubes. If you want to be taken, seriously, if you want your story, your visual storytelling to really hit home, cannot be any questions to its validity. It's got to be dead on. So I find this piece from Geographic really, sorry, bad pun, really eye opening to explain to us how we actually, take something for granted, our vision, and how it really makes a difference in our life, a difference in our photography, a difference in our visual storytelling. So give it a thought. I think that if you really put your mind to it, you'll figure out that the eyes have it. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Make it a grand and glorious week. And remember to make every click your story.